Hello everybody, my name is Peter Bonnell. I'm the Senior Curator at QUAD. I'm here today looking at the exhibition that is currently on display at QUAD Gallery during this pandemic. We're making this in, mid-July. I'm very pleased today that I have our artist Anna Bunting-Branch as well as Aliyah Hussain, the sound artist who collaborated with Anna on this exhibition, and the co-curator of the exhibition and the founder of the Mechatronic Library, Helen Starr. So Anna and Helen join us from London, and Aliyah from Manchester. I want to say a big thank you to V21 Artspace for producing this 3D virtual exhibition tour. When you use the scan at home, you'll be able to go on these white circles here to have a look at the films, the VR work. These are works on VR headsets here. You'll also be able to hear the soundtrack if you go to these parts as well, and we'll go to that as this tour progresses, and the film work here as well. So this is the exhibition, Warm Worlds and Otherwise. This project came out of an open call for a project called Worlds Amongst Us that was organised by Mechatronic Library with Wysing Arts Centre. And there's a residential period at Wysing Arts Centre in 2018, if memory serves. And the other partners as part of this project, as well as QUAD and Mechatronic Library, is Wysing Arts Centre and FACT Liverpool. The exhibition is toured from Wysing to Liverpool and it's currently on display at QUAD. Today we're going to mostly hear from artists Anna and Aliyah and curator Helen Starr, and I'll try and pop in with a few words as well. So Anna, welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this tour with us today. This is the obvious one. Can you talk about the project, and maybe Helen can pitch in as well, and Aliyah? Give us an overview, first of all. I think that'd be a great thing to be able to explain it as briefly as you can to the people watching at home.
Yeah, so the project in general came out of an open call, which Helen was instrumental in putting together, which was really concerned with how artists engage with new technologies. So technologies like virtual reality, augmented reality, and game engine technology was the original open call. And for me as a painter, a lot of the kind of interest in this was the first time that I'd worked with anything to do with virtual reality. The interest for me was really in how to kind of explore the possible transformations and kind of mediations between the medium of painting and animation, which are ways that I have worked in the past, and then creating a more immersive environment and also a more kind of performative way of relating to the work. And that was something which I saw being more possible in the experience of VR, experiencing the work on a headset. And then specifically for QUAD, the work that we're looking at now here in this sandbox kind of extends that back out into the gallery again. So this is a work where the sound is embedded inside this platform, so opening up this sense of being immersed in the viewing experience in a physical way in the gallery. So that was kind of some of the interest that I had in a material sense.
Thank you. So Helen,
I was just going to follow on from what Anna said, and maybe Aliyah could also pick up a little bit on this. That I'd been thinking about the word and concept of ontology for a while, which is really how we move through the world as conscious beings, and how different beings and creatures are, and how different my experience of the world is with regarding to my personal ethnicity to the others around us. So the overarching idea of the project was around this idea of there are worlds among us, and that we all perceive reality in a virtual way. So how, in that case, can we and do we all be able to communicate with each other in a meaningful way? And one of the things I'd been thinking a lot about virtual reality, and I really believe this today, is that virtual reality in many ways is very close to music, in that it's an immersive experience, and it's an embodied experience in a way that Anna's objects and artworks constantly blur the boundaries between what is painted, what is sculptural, what is felt, what is held, what is outside of you, and what is inside of you. So these boundaries that we move constantly through and within are very interesting to me, and what is most exciting in many ways about the work that Anna and Aliyah produced.
And one of the things that I think is really interesting as well, picking up on that, is also something which is really central to the whole project is storytelling, and the way that so particularly science fiction stories allow us to maybe bridge some of these differences in experience and create something, a kind of another world, a third space in a way where these kind of encounters can happen, and also to speculate about the possibility that things can change and we can kind of imagine our relation to the world and worlds differently. And so I think this sense, like Helen's talking about, of virtual reality, sound, painting, animation, science fiction, all of these kind of genres and ways, really there's a kind of sense of these being ways that we can engage with stories and tell stories in different ways. And so I think these networks of collaborations that the project emerges from is also really important. So the relationship between the sound and the visual to the story world that you're immersed in is really fundamental. So that's where the collaboration with Aliyah also really brings the project to life in a new sense.
One of the things I really loved the most about working with you, Anna, is how generous you are about your inspiration. And one of the most exciting things was being introduced to all these amazing feminist science fiction writers. The Memoirs of a Spacewoman in particular was so exciting for me because I had read that book before you produced your work, and the images that grew in my mind from reading a particular story, which I won't name in case anyone wants the experience, were almost exactly like the images that you produced. And for me, this was a moment of like amazement, because normally we exist in the world, but we don't know if we're thinking and seeing and visualizing the same things. And so for me to have that experience meant that you and I were both sharing the same world. And that's not something that I've ever really experienced before. This idea of translations and moving into minds and glimpses of perspectives, and Aliyah with your music as well, and this notion of music as an embodied form of communication, which comes through so beautifully with the work AU Soundbox, is also very much part of Amerindian cosmologies. So I don't know if this is for Aliyah, a question for Aliyah. I don't know if when you were creating the sonic world for the sandbox, AU Sandbox, if you thought about how the feeling of the music moving through our bodies, what it would do to us.
Yeah, I think partly like that was key, but because the intention was that it would be this very physical experience that was kind of very present as I was making it, but I guess it was done quite intuitively as well in the way that I kind of crafted the layers of sound. So the sound for this piece was taken from the first two worlds that you experience in the VR. So I kind of remixed elements. So I guess to bring it back as like a description of how I created it, going back to Anna's talking about building narratives and stories, I sort of built the sound world alongside Anna's sort of visual and narrative world, crafted all these components, a kind of library of sound, or like all the kind of objects and moments that were present in the narrative and in the paintings just before they were made into the animations. And so using those individual moments and pieces of sound to then sort of craft this more whole sonic spatial world using those components. So for the sound for this was kind of taking those two worlds, unpicking them and kind of re-putting them together, but with this very physical, this physical intention of like thinking about bass, thinking about vibrations, thinking about how sound kind of travels through your body and how that feels. But yeah, more in a kind of intuitive way than I guess like a science way.
Shall we listen to an excerpt of the sound? I mean, one thing I would go into is just that idea of the nitty-gritty components of making it, Anna. So can you talk a bit about that? We may not talk about the group that you work with. It was such a fascinating process, that intensive residential period where you pitched that idea and started to develop it with practitioners and almost like the engineers that Wysing and Helen in particular put you in touch with. And it was just a great sort of organic process as it went through, and you pitched the idea for Warm Worlds and otherwise. Can you talk a bit about that and what it meant to you in your practice now?
Yeah, so do you mean thinking a bit about the clinic itself?
Talking about that and how the work developed and what you've got out of it, because one thing that I'm really intrigued by is how we, and Helen, I know you're super keen on this as well, is equipping artists to more tools to make the work in different ways. Yeah,
definitely. Well, so yeah, I mean, the clinic experience itself, which was the first kind of I guess the kind of first stage of the project, was there was 8 artists, is that right, Helen, at that stage who came to the clinic? And yeah, so that was an amazing residential time at Wysing Art Centre with these artists, and really just kind of sharing our work and really thinking through in that space together what it would mean for this work to encompass. I think some people had experience of working more with VR and AR and game engine, and some people like me had never worked with those technologies before, and even I had quite limited experience of artworks in that way. I'd seen a few but not loads, and so it really opened up I think especially for me, well, there were 2 main things. The first was to do with politics, and this was something that me and Helen, and right in the beginning, were kind of, that we've continued to kind of unpack around the politics of the technology, what it means to be immersed in a technology in the way that VR invites us to be. And also the implication of that with storytelling, I think, is really interesting in the sense of how the viewer is implicated in the scene, how certain devices that maybe we're very used to using in terms of single channel screen animations, in terms of editing, and like how we kind of work to build up a narrative or to kind of share a sense of sort of emotional resonance. All of those things change really with VR, and it's much more of an invitation for a viewer to participate in how a story unfolds. And so for me, that was a really big journey really of how to work with that over the subsequent iterations of the work and development of it. And I think also it's like, well, it was wonderful to be in that conversation with Helen and with the other curators and with the artists. And I think being there with Rebecca Allen was kind of bonkers as well, in terms of I wasn't familiar with her work before, but I think thinking about generations of, I don't know if she would say this, but what I would say feminist practice, thinking about iconic figures who've made ways of working possible, that was just extraordinary to be in a conversation with her and then to see the work at QUAD that developed. So yeah, it was a really instrumental series of conversations. I don't know how you reflect on it, Helen.
So I think my perspective and observation about VR is that it's impossible to work in VR unless you have a high degree of empathy, because you can't control or direct in a forced way where people are looking at in your work. So you may have put something exciting to the left, but if someone's looking to the right, then they're not going to see this amazing thing that you've placed in the work. So being constantly, as a creator, aware of a multitude of perspectives and how people engage with things while you are creating the work is something that is unique to this particular medium. You know, also as a medium that allows you to go back and back again. It is not a linear construct where there's you know, A to B to C as a story. Every time I immerse myself in Anna's VR work, I look at it from a different perspective. And, you know, sometimes I look down. You know, I spent an entire version once just looking behind me, you know, and and really like seeing and observing and just able to be in people's minds. And it's something I write about in my essay, Anna, that I absolutely love about your particular practice, is that yes, it is about storytelling, but it can simply be an emergence in pleasure. It can just be I think I called it a pleasure dome to the senses. So you can just exist and enjoy it at a visceral level, especially with Aliyah's music. And then coming out of it as well, you can also construct the story, which I wanted to talk a little bit about as well, which is this notion of colonialism, which is so prevalent to now. And what was interesting for me was that not very many people picked up at the clinic that your work was a work of colonial cosmology that spanned into the future, because it's a futuristic piece, but it takes these painful old world histories, resets them into the future, and therefore allows us to look at them with the pain that we feel in the present when we talk about them, which is a very Afrofuturistic, actually, Afrofuturistic concept. And I really enjoyed as well your playing with time, the collapsing of time. The second piece, in the end, all I could write about was it as an indescribable experience, because I did not have the words to describe what was happening in scene number 2.
From the fly perspective. Yeah.
Yes, from the.
Well, I think that it's very interesting. It's one of my favorite bits of your essay when you write about this kind of meeting of worlds that, you know, with Columbus and this landing upon and setting out to colonize the Americas, and this moment as being where our kind of histories, that's the beginning of a possible future in which we also meet and make this work. And I think about that a lot, because I think it's kind of overwhelming in a way, that the weight of those histories. And I think that it's something which you also write about in terms of science fiction as a genre being a place where those colonial fantasies unfold, but also where voices like Aliette de Bodard and other writers, I think Naomi Mitchison in her own way as well, try to wrestle with and I think subvert this sense of a kind of colonial impulse in science fiction. And so, yeah, I think that's really fundamental to what I think about when I think about feminist science fiction, as also being a kind of intervention into some of that language as well.
Do you want to talk a bit about the animated works on the screens, Anna, at all, and how they fit in? Or?
Yeah, well, I think so. This work was also new for QUAD. So basically, the way that the work has developed since 2018 is a kind of iterative, like accumulation of different elements of the project. So certain things. So first at Wysing, and then shown at Facts in an exhibition You Feel Me curated by Helen, and then at QUAD being this culmination of the project. And so this short looping animation was really playing with an idea which was something that came out of conversations with Aliyah about this interest in remixing. So this idea of having a relation to the whole project with the show at QUAD, which was remixing some of the sound that we had in this animation, remixing imagery from Meta, the VR animation, and projecting it out into the space. So in the space, and this would be something that would be really nice for Aliyah to speak a bit more about, but in thinking about QUAD, which is such a huge space, to also host work which by virtue of being on a headset is quite physically small, and thinking about how to stage that in the space, we used sound in a quite specific way in terms of creating these different kind of zones of experience. I think it'd be really nice if Aliyah wants to talk a little bit more about the way that sound operated in the space.
Talking about remixing, I guess it was the way that I built the sounds in the beginning was making all these parts for the different parts, the worlds in the narrative that Anna made, and then taking those and sort of remixing them to make this more spatial presence in the gallery. Practically, logistically, we split the worlds into two sections, and we did that with the gallery as well. So taking the elements of worlds 1 and 2 and the last 2, 3 and 4 and splitting them, and those elements created the remix for each side. And then as we were thinking about it overlapping and sort of being in the space, it was quite a conscious decision to make the sounds, the all 4 world sounds, mesh as one. So when you're kind of in the middle of the space, you've got this one soundtrack playing that has these balance elements of all 4 parts, all 4 worlds. And then, as you move through the different sides, you lean more into a different sound world. And then in the middle, you hear all of it playing as one track. Yeah, which was really, really nice way to work.
I knew when we started this talk, we would need maybe an hour or more. But I'd like to thank you all so much for taking the time to give us that brief overview. It may seem brief, but I think when people watch it back, I think they'll get a lot from it. I have some really fascinating themes explored throughout the whole show, and ethos and the origins of the project too. Helen, Anna, Aliyah, thank you so much for joining me. I'm just going to say thanks to our funders, Arts Council England, Derby City Council, and to our project partners, FACT Liverpool, Wysing Arts Centre, and of course the Mechatronic Library. Thank you all for listening. Stay safe and well if you listen to this during the pandemic. And again, Helen, Anna and Aliyah, thank you so much for taking the time to do this today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.